there's a sound we all know. The shuffle of paper money, the rattle of dice, and the quiet thrill of buying Park Place before your friends do. But behind that childhood game lies one of the most accurate and haunting metaphors for our global economy. Because Monopoly isn't just entertainment. It's a mirror, a miniature model of capitalism, credit, and collapse. And in 2025, that mirror looks clearer than ever. Welcome back to FluxFolio Finance, where we decode the hidden logic behind markets, money, and power. Today, we're exploring the monopoly game of the global economy, how a board game invented 120 years ago predicted the way nations, banks, and investors play today. The origins of the game. It began not as a game of greed, but as a warning. In 1903, Elizabeth Magie, an American writer and economist, designed the Landlord's game. It wasn't meant to glorify capitalism, it was meant to expose it. Magie wanted to show how land monopolies enrich the few and impoverish the many, an idea drawn from the economist Henry George, who believed that rent from land should serve the public, not private landlords. Her game had two versions, one called Prosperity, where players shared wealth and all benefited, and one called Monopolist, where one player crushed the rest. Guess which version the world fell in love with? When Charles Darrow commercialized it during the Great Depression, selling it to Parker Brothers for a fortune, the irony was complete. A warning about inequality had become the best-selling symbol of it. The rules of money. Think about the mechanics. Every player starts equal. The bank gives you money. That's your liquidity. Every time you pass go, you collect $200, like a miniature version of quantitative easing. At first, everyone's rich in cash and optimism. Then the buying spree begins. Properties get snapped up, rents rise, houses multiply. Soon, money pools into the hands of those who own, not those who work. Sound familiar? That's not just monopoly, that's every liquidity cycle in modern history. In the 1920s, easy credit flooded the US economy. Banks lent freely, people speculated wildly, on stocks, on homes, on dreams. The board looked rich, but by 1929, the dice stopped rolling. The crash came, and the weak were wiped out. Then again, in the 2000s, after the dot-com bust, central banks printed money, interest rates fell, and the world poured liquidity into real estate. Mortgages became bets, houses became chips. And in 2008, when the music stopped, the game reset again. But the banks didn't go bankrupt. They were the bank itself. Then came 2020, and the pandemic unleashed the biggest round of money creation in history. Over $25 trillion printed globally in 2 years. Markets soared, home prices doubled, cryptos went to the moon. Until 2022, when inflation returned like the rent collector at midnight. The real-world Monopoly board. What happens when Monopoly goes global? When the players are nations, each with their own corner of the board. Let's walk around it. The United States is Boardwalk and Park Place, the premium real estate of global finance. It issues the world's currency, the US dollar, which anchors 88% of global trade. It collects rent not from land, but from debt, by selling treasuries that everyone must hold. When America raises interest rates, it's like doubling the rent on the entire board. Every country pays more to play. China is the electric company, the industrial power grid of the world. It manufactures 28% of all goods, dominates rare earths, batteries, and solar panels. When China powers up, global growth surges. When it slows, the lights dim everywhere. Europe is the railroads, the connective tissue. Not flashy, but essential. Its ports, banks, and trade routes link the global game together. A slowdown in Frankfurt or Rotterdam can freeze supply chains like a blocked railway. The Middle East plays the utilities, oil, gas, and petrodollars. You pay them every time you move. Energy is the original rent. In 2025, their sovereign funds, from Saudi Arabia to the UAE, hold over $4 trillion, quietly buying shares in the world's next AI, defense, and tech empires. And the rest? Africa and Latin America are the cheaper properties, rich in natural resources, yet still charging low rent. India and Southeast Asia are the orange and red sets, rising fast, full of potential, but still catching up. Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, the short rail links of technology, semiconductors, and innovation. It's the same game, just bigger. The dice are called trade, the rent is interest, and the board never sleeps. The bankers roll. But in this global game, the bank isn't just handing out $200 anymore. It's the central bank, the Federal Reserve, the ECB, the PBOC. When times are good, the bank floods the system with cash, cutting rates, buying bonds, creating credit. That's pass and go, the age of easy money. When inflation bites, the bank tightens, raising rates, selling assets, shrinking its balance sheet. That's when the bank stops giving $200 and starts collecting rent back. Since 2022, the Fed has drained nearly $2 trillion from its balance sheet. Borrowing costs have soared. The weakest players, small firms, indebted countries, speculative investors, are mortgaging their properties to survive. Just like in monopoly, liquidity always ends up in the same hands, those who can wait the longest. But here's the twist. In the board game, the bank never worries about collapsing the system. In real life, the Fed does. If it tightens too far, credit freezes. If it prints too much, inflation burns. It must keep the game alive forever. So the modern central banker isn't just a cashier. They're the game master, trying to keep everyone playing without letting anyone win too completely. The bubble cycles. Look back through time, and you'll see the same rhythm repeating. Easy money, rising assets, concentrated wealth, sudden crash, reset. In the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties. In the 2000s, the housing boom. In the 2020s, the everything bubble. Every time, money is printed faster than real productivity can keep up. Every time, investors believe this time is different. And every time, the cycle ends with a reckoning, when liquidity dries up and rent exceeds wages. We've built entire global prosperity on a monopoly board that expands only through debt. It's beautiful, until someone lands on Boardwalk with a hotel. The game today. In 2020, we are playing late-stage monopoly at a planetary scale. The US owns the currency. China owns the factories. Europe owns the rails. The Middle East owns the fuel. And emerging markets supply the land, labor, and minerals that keep it all running. The central banks are the referees, cutting, printing, and tightening to prevent collapse. But here's the paradox. The bank has become too important to lose. If it stops giving out money, no one can pay rent. If it prints too much, inflation destroys the currency. The dice still roll, but the outcome feels rigged. Because just like the game, wealth pools at the top, and everyone else hopes to survive another turn. What Monopoly got wrong? Yet there's one thing Monopoly got wrong, and it's the reason the real world hasn't ended yet. In the game, the board never expands. In reality, we do. Every new invention, from electricity to AI, from oil to the internet, adds new tiles to the board. Innovation, demographics, and human creativity keep resetting the game. They are the real go, the force that keeps the world from becoming one giant foreclosure. But that expansion only works if rent-seeking doesn't suffocate creation. When monopolies stifle innovation or debt overwhelms growth, the board stops growing, and the monopoly endgame begins again. So what does this mean for us, the players watching the dice roll in real time? It means stay liquid. Hold assets that produce, not just appreciate. Watch the central banks. They're the real dealers now. Diversify across nations, currencies, and cycles. And remember, in every game, fortunes change hands, not when money is printed, but when the rules do. Because the lesson of monopoly isn't that capitalism ends in one winner, it's that unchecked leverage always resets the board. The trick, as investors, is to stay in the game when others fold and to buy back the board after the crash. This is FluxFolio Finance, where we play to understand, not to gamble. If you found this story illuminating, like, subscribe, and share it. And remember, in this game of money, you can't control the dice, but you can learn to see the board.